When you need something hearty to fuel you up fast, grab a can of Campbell's Chunky Soup. Packed with big chunks of meat and vegetables, and now in 50 flavors. Campbell's Chunky Soup, the hearty way to fuel your game. Find your flavor at Chunky.com.
This is Larry Culpepper, and if you love college football as much as I do, enough to invent the playoff, you're welcome. Do yourself a favor and subscribe to the Championship Drive podcast in the Listen tab of your ESPN app. App is short for app.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Busy day in sports. Let's get to it here. Off the top we go, and it begins, of course, with a big night in Cleveland. Will Golick be celebrating tomorrow morning, or will Chicago have life? The Indians and the Cubs tonight as the Indians try to win their first World Series since 1948 at home against the Cubbies.
What a night it's going to be. We'll get into it. They've moved the Cavalier game up an hour, so the players are going to play that game, and I know that Houston's happy they'll be able to get out of Dodge, and the players on Cleveland's team are going to go over and watch the game. We know about Arrieta and Tomlin. We'll talk more about them. The Cubs get Kyle Schwarber back. He's 9 of 16 in 4 career road games in Cleveland. Lindor for Cleveland. You know, you want to talk about a guy that's been hot this postseason. He's hitting .421, most hits by a player aged 22 or younger since Edgar Renteria had 9 against the Indians in 1997. So I'll be interested. Lindor's been having an excellent postseason. Really interested what Schwarber does coming back and getting his 4 at-bats.
Lindor is one of those players that are, I'm going to use the word literally beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Like there is something beautiful about watching a really good middle infielder. Lindor plays with a joy and a spirit. He is a terrific young player. What else?
Off the top.
College football playoff rankings. The first of the year will be released tonight, 7 Eastern on ESPN. Now, I think there's not a lot of suspense in who the 4 teams at the top are going to be. It's in some order. It's going to be Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Washington.
Yes, it is.
We'll see the order, and we'll see where everyone else falls.
And we'll see how that doesn't matter, because the last 2 initial rankings, you go back 2 years, only one in the initial ranking made the Final Four, and that was Florida State. And last year, 2 in the initial ranking, Alabama and Clemson, who turned out to play for the title, was in the initial Final Four and made it to the Final Four. And one thing you don't want to do is lose now. In the first 2 seasons of this college football playoffs, the only team to lose in Week 10 or later and still make the semifinals was Michigan State last season. You know, they went on that run. They beat Ohio State, and then they beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. So if you lose from here on out, it's a good bet you're not going to make it. Michigan State, the one exception that did make it
Does it say there? Because, I followed the Big Ten so closely. They beat Ohio State with that incredible. Who'd they lose to?
They lost to Nebraska 39-38. On that late TD in Week 10.
Yes.
They won all the remaining games, including beating number 2 Ohio State and Columbus, and then number 4 Iowa.
They won them that Ohio State game without their starting quarterback, where the kicker was windmilling and all that sort of stuff. All right, so we'll see what happens there tonight. College basketball, for whatever this is worth, the first AP poll is out. Duke is number 1. They are loaded once again with these fabulous freshmen.
Yep, Duke number 1. They're tied with UCLA for second most times in the AP poll history. North Carolina, Duke and UCLA have done it 8 times. North Carolina 9 times. All 8 preseason number 1s for the Blue Devils have come since in the most recent time. The Bruins were preseason number 1 in 1973 and 74 when that got going.
So is it meaningful? No, but it's worth mentioning in case you're wondering about the start
of
college basketball. And then, of course, we get to Monday Night Football, and that's going to kill the music on that one because we'll stay here. The Vikings lose their second straight game after starting 5-0. Mike, they have lost back-to-back games, including what I guess could be described as a stunner last night at Soldier Field, a game in which they were really handled by the Chicago Bears, who had just 1 win coming in. We were joking about the Bears losing to Jacksonville and everything else, and will the Bears have as many wins this season as the Cubs do in the World Series? And all of a sudden, the Bears go out last night and really dominate the football game.
They really did. 403 yards for them, 258 for Minnesota. But for Minnesota, we keep talking about if they're going to go as far as their defense takes them. And this offense for Chicago put up 403 yards against them. I was very, very surprised. Jordan Howard had 153 yards running, 69 on 1 run. So if you take that out, the average wasn't great, but he did have that big run. And I love this kid. I think he is a stud. running the ball and catching out of the backfield. I really look forward to seeing where his career goes. But I was very, very surprised at the Minnesota defense, which has been awesome, this year, but not so much last night. And then Minnesota offensively, you keep saying it. I mean, I talked a lot about this position yesterday, the offensive line. That offensive line has been riddled with injuries. Last night, Alex Boone, who they signed from San Francisco last year, he now is being evaluated for concussion. They've lost a ton of people there. Sam Bradford has been sacked 11 times in the last 2 games. He was sacked 8 times in the first 4 games this season. Then that O-line started getting chipped away at. They don't have a rushing attack at all. We know Bradford isn't a high-numbers quarterback anyway, so we thought, hey, they can get by with efficiency on their possessions, a decent running game, a decent passing game, and live on their defense. Well, that sure didn't happen last night.
Well, let's give you some more numbers. Again, the context of that, as Golick just mentioned, sacked 11 times in the last 2 games. Those are their 2 losses this season. They also couldn't run the ball at all with their offensive line. They ran the ball only 18 times yesterday, and half of those gained 2 yards or fewer. They ran the ball between the tackles 15 times for just 42 yards. So their offensive line is their biggest problem. When you look at it right now, they overcame the loss of the quarterback.
Right.
They were even looking like they were overcoming the loss of the superstar running back. But when the entire offensive line sort of falls apart in unison due to injury and other factors, that's something that really no team can overcome.
It's going to be tough. Listen, that defense, when they go into, and you know what? When you're on a team like that, you know what it's about. Listen, we went through it in Philadelphia the year that Randall Cunningham got hurt, and we went through a bunch of quarterbacks, and we had a great defense. We knew we had to carry that team. This Minnesota defense knows it has to carry that team. This Minnesota defense is going to go into films today, and they're really, really going to be picking on themselves for saying, we can't let this happen. They're going to go as far as that defense can take them this year, and last night they did not perform well, and give all the credit in the world. This is a Chicago team. Both their starting guards, Sitton, who they got from Green Bay, and Kyle Long, who's been in the Pro Bowl every year he's been in the league, both out in this game, and they rush for the yards they do. Again, one big run by Howard set that up, but Howard did have 202 yards from scrimmage because he had 4 catches as well. He is a shining bright spot for that team.
And Jay Cutler back yesterday and played a good game. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance in November. Progressive will give away over 100 vehicles to veterans in need as part of its Keys to Progress program, giving thanks for the freedom they've given us. To learn more, go to progressive.com/keys to progress. So a very nice program there. More on Cutler. He was 0 for 4 targeting Alshon Jeffrey in the first half. And then I heard an interview he did afterwards where he went in there and he said, we got to get Jeffrey involved in the second half. He did immediately 3 times on that one drive that went down and ultimately resulted in the touchdown. He was 4 for 4 throwing to Alshon Jeffrey in the second half yesterday. So that combination was working. Let's hear a little bit from the postgame here. Let's start with Randy Moss. For those of you listening on radio, it's amusing because Randy Moss, the former Viking, is dressed as a Viking.
Yes, he is.
On the field when he's making these comments about how his former team has kind of lost its mojo.
They lost their mojo. I said last week, we were talking about the bye week blues. They showed the bye week blues in Philadelphia. And I think that I said this last week, guys, about the new CBA. Matt, you definitely educated me on the new CBA where they were only allowed to practice so many days during the week of their off week. And one thing about it, we've been there before. When you have the momentum, you do not need a bye week because one thing about it, the Minnesota Vikings have shown in the last 2 weeks, they've lost their momentum. They had it going into the bye. They lost it here tonight.
Yeah, listen, it's a shame because you don't have a choice. You get your bye week, you got to deal with it. Every team gets one. You have to deal with the bye week.
Listen, Andy Reid never loses after that. You can spin that in any direction you want. If you let the bye week destroy your momentum, shame on you.
That's an excuse. There's no way you can delve into that one. This one, as I said, we know the Minnesota offense is going to be ordinary. The Minnesota defense has to be great, and they have to be consistently great, and that's how they're going to win. This was a 20-10 game, a loss for them, and Chicago could have had more. Chicago's first 2 trips into the red zone, they only got field goals. They were winning 13-3 at half. It could have been more.
Much more, yes.
I was really surprised.
I was sure they were going to lose as a result.
Very surprised at the defense of Minnesota, but week in and week out, they have to be the dominant force. course, you look at Denver. That's what Denver did last year, even with the great Peyton Manning. We know what the quarterback numbers were last year for Denver. They were horrible in totality with Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. It was that defense week in and week out, or, maybe not every single week, but enough to get them in the position they were in, and that's where Minnesota's going to be. Listen, they're 5-2. They still have they're leading the division. They can still get where they want to go, but that defense, the offense is going to try and get better, but you have the players you have. You have injuries you have to deal with. The running game isn't going to be great. And as I said, they're not going to have unbelievable numbers. They need to be efficient. The defense needs to be great.
On the other side, the Bears get the win. Apparently, Jay Cutler gave an impassioned pregame speech, which is about the last thing you ever would have expected to hear about Jay Cutler. And then he played a pretty good game.
He did.
And our Louis Riddick had some interesting thoughts last night with Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter after the game. Listen to Louis.
I think Jay is the ultimate tease. That's what he's been his entire career.
You said it well.
Okay? He will have games like this where you get just absolutely enamored with his physical skills, and you go, well, maybe, and there will be coaches out there who go, you know what, I'll take some of that because maybe I can be the one who makes the difference. And that's what will always sustain Jay's career until he just physically can't do it anymore. Because the dearth of quarterbacks in the NFL, there just aren't enough. Mm-hmm. We talk about it all the time. There aren't enough. And when Jay has games like this, on a stage like this, against a defense like that, when no one expected him to do it, this is where you go, well, maybe I can get it. And that's what he's always going to be. It just is what it is.
It is what he does. He flashes that talent. Listen, you and I, we did when he was at Denver, did games, Monday nighters early on when you and I were calling those, and we both were enamored with his talent. You're enamored with his arm and what he can do at times. I mean, this is why he got a big contract and why he's done at times what he's done. But I agree, it's like the ultimate tease. You see that and you want it more. You want it on that consistent level, and you don't get it. And people talk about his attitude. Like I heard one of our guys talking last night. He's got to come out and his body language has to be different. You know what? I'm tired of that, quite honestly. He is what he is. He's not going to change. He's not going to run out on the field and do cartwheels. He's not going to. He's not going to be the guy standing on the sideline, when the series ends, giving high fives to everybody. Don't try and make him something he's not. That's not him. This is what you get. The question is, do you want to take a chance on that? Because I think they're going to move on in Chicago from him. But do you want to take a chance on him? Last night it was good. Last night was good. Jay Cutler, again, with a couple backup O-linemen, did a nice job. You see his wife tweeted out, "Can everybody shut up now?" I think was her tweet out there. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's what I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
All right, because to illustrate your point, again, when you and I did his games, and we're going back to when he was in Denver, so that's forever ago. Mm-hmm. But if you just put on the good Jay Cutler film, you could convince yourself he's as good as any quarterback in the league. If you just watch him at his best, he is as physically gifted as any good quarterback in the league. We're watching Derek Carr do things right now, watching Aaron Rodgers do things. Jay Cutler can do all of those things. The problem is, 3/4 of the time he doesn't, and he also adds in the plays that make you want to smash your head into a brick wall. So let me ask you the following question. Yes or no? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you to this.
Yeah.
Week 1, 2017, will Jay Cutler be a starting quarterback in the NFL? Will he be a starting quarterback for a team in the NFL Week 1 next year?
With anybody. I mean, could it be with Chicago, or is his time gone there? His dead money isn't a lot for them.
I think there's almost zero chance it'll be Chicago.
There. I'm sitting here looking at the teams, Green, and I'm trying to figure out where a guy like him could go, because you either have established veterans or young guys that are playing that you don't want to stop them from playing. And there doesn't seem to be many places. I almost still want to say yes. He'll be a starting quarterback next year in the NFL, because he flashes enough to where he's not going to get a monster contract. It'll probably be on the shorter term, kind of a, here's a contract for you. You'll get money and incentives and stuff. It'll still be a nice contract. I mean, don't get me wrong. Quarterbacks get paid pretty well.
What's he, about 34 now? How old is Cutler? He's been around a while. He was in that same draft with Leinart.
33. So what kind of team do you want to go to? You don't want to go to a building team, because you'd rather do that with a younger team. You want to go to a team that's kind of on the upswing. I mean,
a thought that I would have is just they worked well together. If Adam Gase and the Dolphins decide that they're out of love with Ryan Tannehill,
I don't know the money aspect there of the deal that he signed and what that would cost him, because that's one of the teams I thought of as well. Because I'm going down name me the next team. The Cleveland Browns. What they're going through. Are they going to bring in? They're not going to bring on Jay Cutler. They have two, and Texans have money tied up. Tennessee, no. Colts, no. Jacksonville.
Herman Edwards just yelled San Francisco.
I haven't got to the NFC
yet.
I was going to get to them, but Jacksonville, or is that a team? Is Blake Bortles time done?
Pull the plug on Bortles? I would be stunned. Stunned. You'll fire the coach and bring in someone else to try and rehabilitate Bortles before you do anything else.
Raiders not happening. Broncos not happening. No on the Chiefs. No on San Diego.
Why are the Broncos not happening? Are
Paxton Lynch?
Right, so you're deciding Paxton Lynch is ready to go next year?
I don't think.
Let's see. There's a lot of season left to go this year.
Yeah, I don't think Jay Cutler's going there. And then you get to the NFC, and, man, I'm going down the list, and you really
Arizona?
Arizona, I thought you were replacing an old with an old, and Carson Palmer being done.
He's not nearly as old as Carson Palmer.
No, he's not. Well, 3 years? Is Carson 36, 30, right in that area there? But the point being, they have some talent there, and to not turn it over to a young quarterback yet, to keep it with a veteran. And then, as Herm yelled out, I was going to get down to is San Francisco. Is that a possible landing spot?
The best of Mike and Mike.
I will never question, in the same way that I don't question Nick Saban, I don't question Bill Belichick.
No.
I don't question Greg Popovich. These guys have proven they know what they're doing. But I do find this a very curious move.
Well, it's curious, but to me, it's not surprising. You knew that this guy was going to be asked for a lot of money. He's somewhat of what we call a joker on defense, in the fact you can move him around. Right. But he's a space player.
But isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
but he's not a hammer. He's not a guy that's going to constantly take the run on. He's a space player, and you did a nice job of illustrating that, Mike, in the fact that he's a spy linebacker in the middle. He can run. He can cover man-to-man. He's good on blitzing. He does a lot of what I call read and react. They put him in there as a plugger in pass defense, and if guys are blocked and no one's coming across the middle, he adds on to the rush. So he's an athletic guy, and teams look for guys like this. In our system, in old Tampa Bay system, he would be a will linebacker. Right. So he's covered up by the 3 technique. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have to take on a lot. He can be like a Derek Brooks. He can run. He can just run, and you send him on blitzes, and he's good in coverage. That's what he does.
That's not what they do.
He's not a guy that's good around garbage. No. If you get a lot of players around him out at his feet or trying to block him, he's better in space. So that's going forward to Cleveland. I'm not saying he didn't fit in New England. I just think most of it is exactly what we talked about and exactly what Bill has done in the past. He trades guys before he has to pay them, and he gets something for them. So now let's spin it forward. He's going to get a ton of money in Cleveland. Now they're at the point, if they can't work out a deal, they can franchise tag him as well. So he could be there, and how will they use him? Here's what they're doing in Cleveland, trying to rebuild. You rebuild with draft picks. You saw 14 draft picks all make the team this year, but you have to supplement that with veterans as well. And here they got a veteran, and not an old veteran. He's only been in the league like 4 years.
He's 27?
Yeah, so you got a versatile guy to go with some of the young players to start to build again. I'll be real interested to see how they use him in Cleveland.
And that's the decision in pro football. You have this period of when you draft the guy, you have about a 4-year window to determine what type of player he is and what is his value monetarily to your football team. And there comes a point, in the National Football League defensively, you'd basically want to play 2 positions on defense. You want to play an excellent cover guy, whether it's a safety that can cover or a corner, and then you want to play a rusher. On offense, you'd like to build it by paying the quarterback. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you have one of those guys that's a franchise guy and a left tackle. I mean, that's how you'd like to divide the money up at those 4 positions.
Mike Herman Edwards is here. We have Ryan Clark coming. I have a few things that I've saved here that I want to do with him. Let me read you a couple of tweets. John tweets, first start a movement to stop moving daylight savings time because being dark by 5:30 is fun for no one. Remember, they moved daylight savings time beyond Halloween. It used to come before.
It's coming this weekend.
It's coming this weekend. And it is because they now have moved it towards always after Halloween. You know me. I'm in
hour and a half.
I'm not in favor of time zones. I have been for years advocating the removal of time zones. China is a country that's basically as big as we are. It's all one time zone. Seems to work. We should just have one time zone. If right now it's 7:05 here and it's 4:05 in L.A., let's make it 5:35 everywhere and get on with our day.
There we go.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
It doesn't matter to me. I sleep 4 hours a day, so it doesn't matter to me. I'm up.
Doesn't care.
It's always daytime for me.
1-800-Flowers.com.
I don't worry about all that nonsense. See, you guys are on that. I got a different clock. Yeah, I'm not on your clock, guys.
Herman on the or the Twitter on the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. You only sleep 4 hours.
And if I get 6, I'm good. But generally 4.5, yeah, I'm good.
And you're fine.
I'm okay.
Fine. You see the guy when he comes in here? He's
I already worked out.
He's already been in the gym.
I worked out this morning. I got up at 3:45 because I knew it was an early one because I had to get here at 6:30.
We all wish. How old are you?
I'm 62.
We all wish we could be like that. Are you kidding me?
I wish I could be like that when I was 22.
Yeah. I mean, are you kidding?
You're remarkable. The
Yeah.
other guy who was like that, and he was much, much, much older than you at this time, was, remember, Dr. Jack Ramsey?
Oh,
yeah.
boy, he was
Holy
the best.
Smokes.
I loved him.
He was
May
the
rest
best.
in peace. Jack used to come on with us all the time. And back in the earliest days of Mike and Mike, he'd come on with us at 7:30 in the morning to talk basketball. He had already gone for a swim in the ocean.
Yeah.
He's the best.
He used to get up in the morning and
Incredible.
swim in the ocean. He was in his 80s. So that's good stuff. Michael tweets, some towns actually do hold Halloween on a Saturday. It's a town-by-town thing. Billy Sale
I
is
see that. I definitely seen that. You absolutely can, right?
Michael tweets, all of us who are teachers would be all for the move. Yesterday was difficult to teach anything, and today won't be any better.
I wonder why. And you're trying to tell kids, don't eat candy in class, right? They got pockets full of candy
That's
right
exactly right.
So we'll have Ryan Clark up here in just a second. Let me give you one more thing, because this is the thing that I mentioned earlier that everyone has been talking about, and I can't make up my own mind whether this means something or it means nothing. Did you see that the World Series game on Sunday night trounced the football game?
Yes.
Oh.
And that's a very attractive football game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Eagles and the Cowboys, which is an historical rivalry. It's two big markets. They're two big national teams, NFC East. The Cowboys are America's team for whatever that's worth. And let me give you a little context on it. So this year, the baseball game on Sunday night, Game 5, Cubs-Indians, did a 15-2 rating. That is compared to an 11-7 rating that the Royals and Mets did last year, comparable game. The football game this year, again, relative to a 15-2, did an 11-5. Mm-hmm. Last year, Green Bay-Denver on the same night did a 14-3. So last year, Green Bay-Denver easily outrated the World Series. This year, the World Series easily outrated the football.
And you look at that rating last year of that football game compared to this year, 14-11? That's Philly and Dallas. I'm surprised. That's a good Sunday night game. I'm surprised at that. But we know ratings have been down in this year for the NFL, and people are given a lot of different reasons. And it's certainly not just one thing. There are multiple reasons. They are absolutely down. And listen, you have the perfect storm this year, don't you? I mean, not only the Cubs and the Indians, the two teams that haven't won in the but it's the Cubs. This rating, as much as an Indian fan as I am, and hope they close down the deal tonight, this is about the Cubs. This is the Cubs in the World Series, and just what that generates for sports fans.
That's a great point. And last year, though, it's Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers. Okay, you got.
I thought of that. Was Peyton playing at that point?
It didn't matter. He's a household name. It's Peyton Manning.
Right, but he may not have been.
You don't watch Peyton Manning.
But he might have been. My point is, he might
was
have
hurt too.
He went through a period where he didn't play last year. Remember?
I don't know if
it might have been Brock Osweiler.
Okay, maybe, but still, the fact that it's Denver with Peyton Manning, whether he's hurt or not, and it's Aaron Rodgers, all that has something to do with it.
Ryan Clark is here with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, half the cost. It was Peyton Manning. Good morning,
Okay,
first
good
off.
morning, guys.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on quickly on this? And then I have some stuff I've been saving for us here. What are your thoughts on this whole ratings down thing in the NFL?
Well, you know, I'm new to the TV guy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm new to understanding what ratings are and how they affect what's going on. And I think it's a lot of things. You can look at the election. You can look at some of the stuff from the Kaepernick fallout. Mm-hmm. And also I think some of these games haven't necessarily been as interesting as we would like. They haven't been as enthralling. The play hasn't been as high of a level as we expect from certain NFL games. And so I think it's a multitude of reasons, like Golick said. And then you look at the Cubs and the Indians. Like, this is a series that people have wanted for hundreds of years. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, hundreds of years they've been waiting on this, and I think that plays a part into it. So it's kind of the perfect storm for the ratings to be down for football and up for baseball.
I think what we didn't even mention is Red Zone Channel and fantasy football. I think these are two huge things that people maybe don't consume a game just by sitting and watching 3 hours of it because they have the red zone on and they're going all over the place.
There's a lot of different reasons, but understand this. The mountain that the National Football League was on It's a pretty high mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and when it drops a little bit, I say, "Ooh, they just dropped." I believe this too. I think a little bit of college football has hurt the National Football League.
Meaning?
In this sense, when you watch a college football game, it's 35, 40, 50 points. And people they like that. I mean, people love scoring, regardless of what we say. They want to see defense when you're winning the last 2 minutes.
Right.
Then they're hollering defense, stop them. First 59, first 58, they could care less. Hey, just keep scoring, boys. In the last 2 minutes, they're voting for defense. They want you to stop them, right? So when you watch college football, and they have this advantage in college football, the quarterback generally is the best player. And what does he do? He runs. Makes a lot of plays with his legs. So they make a lot of plays, and they're spread out. They throw it all over the yard. It's 50 passes, just regular. It's just, Cal Berkeley, my old school, they score 50 points, and they can lose 55 to 50.
Right.
It doesn't matter, okay? And they just play. And so then you watch an NFL game. We're driven by the quarterback. First of all, quarterbacks, we don't want them to run because they get hurt, right? And we protect them. Well, there's a discussion on
Except for one.
Except for that cat in Carolina, right?
There's one of them we don't protect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, you watch an NFL game, and it's like, oh, it's 7-3 in the first quarter. You're going, it's a boring game.
Yeah.
Because on Saturday, you've watched college football all day. When do we start that thing? The game day. At 7 o'clock in the morning in California.
9 o'clock.
Here they go.
Yep.
They're game behind. And, everybody's getting excited. and so you watch a college football game, you turn to any channel, and it's like, there's another touchdown. There's another touchdown. And it's Sunday, you watch Sunday game, it's like, can somebody please score, right? You wait a whole quarter, and it's 7-3. It's 7-3, so you're a fan. You're going, this is a boring game.
I never thought of that because, quite honestly, I'll watch those 55-50 games, and they don't entertain me as much.
One bit for me.
Because you're an old-school defensive guy, though.
I mean, I'd like to see I'd like to see a little bit of both, in that, but that's a good point.
To me, I'm a fan. I love football.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll watch it. High school football is on Friday. I watch football, and you watch it, you sit there, you go, you watch an NFL game, you're almost sleeping. You go, 3 and out, okay, they punt. 3 and out, they punt. And then there's a fumble. Oh, we got the field position. And you sit there and you laugh.
And people will say, well, why can't they make it more exciting in the NFL by having those quarterbacks do that? And it'll never happen because they'll get hurt.
Too much money.
Yeah, they're paid
way
too much money. They'll run too much, and they'll get hurt. And then that'll be the end of that. So that's a very
That's what people,
point.
I think, are, when they watch it. It can be. Now, and when there's an elite quarterback playing, then people will watch it. When you hear Aaron Rodgers, we got to watch them. Right?
I'll tell you what, that Green Bay Atlanta game,
Oh, yeah.
It was a great game to watch.
That was a good game to watch.
See?
And what was the final of that one? It was
33-32.
Yeah. But I'm just saying. So when you hear the quarterbacks, you go, ooh, you're going to watch the Raiders. You're going to watch the Raiders, right? Because that Carr fella, hey, they fourth quarter, here come the Raiders. They got the patch on the eye of the Raiders, right?
What they say, Coach?
Come on, you got to watch those guys.
Let the record show Herman Edwards is a national treasure.
Smokes.
By the way, quick note on this with the baseball. Everyone knows about the Cubs and their history and everything else. Do you know if the Indians win the World Series either tonight or tomorrow night, it will be the first time they win the series in Cleveland since 1920 when they beat the Brooklyn Robins.
Yeah.
The Robins.
I
like my favorite superhero, Robin. The Brooklyn Robins.
Or not.
Players in that series were Pinch Thomas, Duster Mail, Smokey Joe Wood, Burley Grimes, and Ivy Olsen.
I'm telling you right now, you have your movement about Halloween and Independence Day.
Yeah.
My movement is every player needs a nickname.
No doubt about it.
I love those names in the 20s. Read some of this. Smokey.
Pinch Thomas.
Yeah.
Duster Mails, Smokey Joe Wood, Burley Grimes, and Ivy Olsen.
It's awesome. We need to give the stars
Where do
of
they come
every
up with
team.
that stuff?
I don't know, but it's great. Let's give the star. We need to do that one show in the summer when nothing's going on. Is pick the baseball teams, the stars on each team, and give them a nickname. Give them a nickname. It's awesome.
Are you going to let Greeny give him a nickname, though?
No, I'm not letting Greeny give him a
perfect.
nickname. Absolutely
Okay,
not.
Mike and Mike, I don't like this piling on Greeny thing that has begun in Ryan's visits, but we'll visit. All right, it's time for Straight Talk.
I did get screamed at last week.
Straight Talk's brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, half the cost. Okay, here's what I've been wanting to get into this. I really wanted to do it yesterday, but we were just so busy with everything else. So we all know Brian Baldinger, who is a fine NFL player for a long time and works for the NFL Network now, which is significant in that he is an NFL employee.
Teammate of mine in Philly.
A teammate of yours in Philly. But for the purposes of this story, he actually works for the National Football League. If you are an employee of NFL Network, you work for the National Football League. So last week, one day, he was on 97.5 The Fanatic, the radio station in Philadelphia, talking about the Eagles game against the Cowboys. And, Ryan, here's what he said, what Brian Baldinger said. And, Ryan, I start with you because you're the most recent player on this set. Talking about what they have to do to stop Ezekiel Elliott. He said, quote, "This is the guy we've got to hurt. This is the guy we've got to take out of the game. There's got to be 10 guys that want to hurt him every single play. In fact, we may even put a little bounty on Ezekiel Elliott." As the story that I'm reading here by Michael David Smith goes, he then echoed a favorite phrase of Greg Williams during the Saints bounty scandal, saying, "You want to cut the head off to kill the body, that's the guy you've got to get to." So he then went on to explain that there are a lot of things about Zeke Elliott that bother him, including the way his flashiness and the dressing with the short shirt and all that. But let's put that part of it aside for a moment. Let's just talk about how he's a great running back. He is the key to their offense. He's the guy who makes them go. And certainly Herman at the time that you played and Mike at the time that you played, this would have been commonplace discussion.
Yep.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Ryan, you played up until very recently. In the Bounty Gate era, in the player safety era and all of that, is this appropriate conversation around a football game anymore?
It's just not appropriate for people to hear. Right? Yeah. So with the way that we've moved as a society, you don't want to hear these things. Obviously, the NFL, you think about Bountygate and some of the things that were said or we heard Greg Williams said. Obviously, we were just shocked and appalled by it. But it's football. And I know we come to me because I'm the most recent player, but I'm really old as football goes, as the new age of not being able to say certain things, hit people certain ways goes. And yeah, I was part of Greg Williams's defense in 2004 in Washington, where he said if a guy was on the sideline and you pushed him out of bounds, that was an issue to him. You go to him and you take his legs out. You make him remember the fact that he just had the ball. And so I think the way that he worded it is, to people of today's football, it's unacceptable. But that's the way you have to hunt sometimes. And I hate to use the word hunt because I know they'll be calling me barbaric and saying certain things. But that's what it was. When it was a guy who was the fuel to the engine of an offense, it's not necessarily that you thought to yourself, I need to hurt him and he needs to not play football anymore. But in some way, the way we play football needs to affect his effectiveness.
I think that's what we try to explain to people when because we did that all the time. I said it on the $100 big hits, but bounty on that. It happened. It was never just what you said. You never wanted to put the guy out for the year. And I know it's you're doing levels of hurting somebody, but our motto was the more hats you put on a guy, the less chance he has of getting up.
Yeah,
and finishing the game. And who's that good for? It's good for us. So that was the motto. Get all the hats you can on him, and if he doesn't get up, he doesn't get up. And hope he plays next week. It wasn't we don't want to blow his knee out or break something or have him out for the year. We want to knock him out of this game. If we hit him and he doesn't get up, okay.
Good for us.
We move on, and we go play. But to say that now, what Baldy said, Ryan's right. It doesn't sound good at all, but I'm telling that's the talk in locker room.
And it's just interesting. Yeah. And again, I barely know Brian Baldinger, but I do like him. He's been on our show, and I think he's a good guy. I just find it interesting that if you work for the NFL Network, people don't always think of it this way, but you are actually an NFL employee.
Right.
The NFL went after the Saints and basically destroyed the franchise for Bountygate and all the rest of that. And now here you have an NFL employee saying, well, what I think the Eagles need to do is put a bounty on Ezekiel Elliott. That's a very interesting thing to me.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Brian Baldinger, who played offensive line in the NFL for a long time and now works for NFL Network, which again is significant because it means he is an employee of the National Football League, went on the radio in Philadelphia last week on 97.5 The Fanatic previewing Eagles-Cowboys and said, and I quote, of Ezekiel Elliott, "This is the guy we've got to hurt. This is the guy we've got to take out of the game. There's got to be 10 guys that want to hurt him every single play. In fact, we may even put a little bounty on Ezekiel Elliott. And, of course, the question becomes, is that an appropriate way to talk about football anymore in an era where the New Orleans Saints spent an entire season without their head coach because of a bounty program on their team? Can you have an NFL employee suggesting the Eagles should have a bounty on Zeke Elliott? We've heard from Ryan. We've heard from Golick. Herman, let's hear from you.
Well, it's real simple when you break football down in the simplest terms, regardless of what era you played in, whether you played in the era of myself or Golick or Ryan, even the guys before us, the guys that we actually stood on their shoulders to continue the game, to play the game. It's about testing of a man's will. Mm-hmm. It's knocking a man off his spot, to be quite honest. Taking his enthusiasm away for his job that day that you play. And when you feel you've done that, there's this nice feeling you have in the fact that we're going to win today. And I'll tell all parents, it's not meant for everyone. This game of football, it's not. It's just not. And you have to have a certain personality to play it. And it's a game that basically will test all that. And if you're not mentally and physically tough to understand that, this is not the game for you. I'll tell you right away. Mm-hmm. And it's never going to change. And we can change the rules. We can build better equipment, and I think that's all necessary. Mm-hmm. It is really to enforce and intimidate players. That's what you try to do, because then you feel you have an advantage. And when you play defense, that's your intentions. Your intentions are very, very simple. Hit the guy with the ball. Hit him.
Yeah.
And it takes more than one. And you'd like to hit him with a bunch of guys. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. You just go hit him. And if it's the quarterback, hit him. Make him feel uncomfortable. Mm. And if it's a running back, bring hats to the party. Hit him. And if it's a wide receiver, you want to make sure he doesn't feel comfortable coming over the middle of the football field. That's never going to change. And so we can spin it and make it, fluff it up and say we can't use those words.
Right.
I'm just telling you, when you go play this game at any level, it starts in high school, it starts in college, and professional, you get paid for it, but it's the same game. It's about testing a guy's will, and I want to look in that guy's eyes at the end and say, you know what? I'm tougher than you. I am tougher than you. And if I know that, I win my battle.
And that's why I think it's one of the greatest games, and especially at a young age, teaches so much about teamwork, relying on a team member, and getting knocked down. We're always going to get knocked down in life, and how you get back up. But I agree with everything you said. And you know, when we talk about this, you have to understand that there are those out there, you can't use the broad brush and say nobody does it, that really tries to hurt. They'll go for a knee or something like that. That's not what we're talking about.
No.
Right. And I will go back because it's so in my head when I was 10 years old and I was going to first start this game. And my dad, who was a former Marine and a former football player as well, a tough, strong guy, taught me the right way to play football. And one of the things he said about it, as long as you're going to get hit and you're going to learn a lot of things and this and that, he said your job on defense, just what Herm said, is to get the guy with the ball and hit him as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. As hard as you can, and drive him into the ground, when you were allowed to drive him into the ground. But for the sake of this argument, hit him as hard as you can. And sometimes when that happens, he doesn't get up.
Yeah.
And you know what? He said, that's football. If it was a clean hit, and you hit him hard, and he doesn't get up, you don't wish him to be hurt bad, but that's football, and it can happen. So that's kind of what, in mass, what we're saying. Get all the helmet you can on him, and if he doesn't finish the game, he doesn't finish the game.
Well, you know what happened, though? Like, we were all part of these speeches where football has a different language.
Yeah.
Like, it just really does. We don't look at certain words and think to ourselves, we take them for face value. You've heard guys say, you're going to get out, and you're going to play hard, and you're going to kill him. Obviously, we don't think to ourselves, we want this person to die. But sometimes that's the mentality you have to compete at a high level in a very physical sport. And because of Bountygate, because of how we've talked about player safety, I think some of that has been taken where we tried to take all of that out the game when at its essence, at its truest form, that's what football is. We're going to go hunt this man down with the ball, and we hope he doesn't get up. We don't hope that he's disfigured. We don't hope that he can't play again.
Right.
But we hope that every time he has to pull himself off the ground, he thinks to himself, I do not want to play anymore. One of the biggest compliments I ever got in my last year when I was super old, and I was like, yeah, I'm about to go work at Golick and Green. This is done. LaShawn McCoy was running the football, and I tackled him, and he got up, and he said, every time I play you, when I break the line of scrimmage, I look for you. It's the greatest compliment I ever got in life because it let me know that every time he gets the ball, he is wondering where I am because he knows I might miss him. But if I catch him, it's going to be trouble. And that's how you need to play the game.
I so appreciate everything you guys are saying. There is one word, however, in all of this that I think skews it for a lot of people, and that word is bounty. Now, bounty is a word that got the New Orleans Saints almost shut down the franchise, right? I mean, half the guys got fired. The head coach got suspended for a year. You basically took away a franchise ability to succeed based on the word bounty. So I think when we hear the word bounty, those who didn't play, who weren't in that, I get everything else you're saying. Hunt them down, knock them down, hit them, hurt them, take away his will.
But that's what Ryan is saying is like the vernacular that we use. People don't understand it.
What is it?
Because I'll tell you right now, when we did it, it had a bounty. If it was on an illegal hit or if it was on a cheap shot, you didn't get that. You didn't get it.
No doubt.
You didn't get it. It's what I said.
So it's $100 if you knock Ezekiel Elliott out of the game legally.
No, the bounty could be a lot more than that. It was $100 big hit. It could be more than that.
$1,000.
But yeah, it would be if you hit him clean and he can't finish the game, you get that. But you know what you're trying to do, even if there isn't a bounty? The same thing. It's just that's kind of a locker room type of a thing. Hey, we're trying to do this anyway, but if it happens, hey, we'll give you a few.
So why is Brian Baldinger saying it then? That's the part of it that I find interesting is I get what you're saying.
Because that's kind of what
Mike and I had these conversations through the entire Bounty Gate. You explained it to me in ways that I fully understand it. I get what you're saying. But the point is that now here we are in 2016 with all the conversations we're having and the whole concept in an era where we're so worried about who's being protected and who's not and all of that, that we're going to say we're going to put a bounty on Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, is that still okay to say that and to think that, privately or publicly?
The goal hasn't changed.
No.
Like the goal is the same, and it's going to be the same as long as we play football. What we can say to the masses and what the masses will consume and accept has become different, right? Because we have told the world that we are going to protect players and player safety is important. But you can believe when true defensive players step on the field, they want to make their presence felt, whether it's we're going to get a bounty for putting this guy out the game, or it's just the simple satisfaction of knowing that I'm the most physical person on this field. That's what football is.
And I will say this, and I want to make sure I clarify what I just said. I have never taught or never played the game of football with the intentions to injure a player. Right. That is not football at any level.
Completely agree.
And if any coach coaches it that way, he should get out of the game at any level. That is not the intentions. The intentions is to test a person's will within the framework of the rules. Mm-hmm. That's the way the game is played, okay? That's the way it's taught by 99% of any coach or any player that steps on the field. I never – and maybe I'm naive. I never think a player – his intentions are to injure a guy.
Right. And some are. That's why we can't say it 100%. Yeah. Some are, some do. But I'm with you. I completely still go back to my dad raising me to play the game. And he taught me, in my opinion, to play the game the right way.
Yes.
Hard, clean, physical football. And that's what I try to pass. I completely agree with you.
Ryan, let me ask you two questions. In your opinion, I know these – I'm going to get a little deep here with you, but is Vontaze Burfict a dirty player? I'll tell you in advance what the second question is.
Yeah.
Was James Harrison a dirty player?
No.
Your teammate?
No. James and Vontaze are totally different to me because some of the extracurriculars that go on, like after play, some of the stepping on people and different things like that, James never did. James' decision every time he stepped on the field was physically, I am going to dominate you. And I think even if Baldy uses those words, it's a different statement. I'm going to physically dominate you. I think Vontaze and James are different because of what happens in between plays and what is said from each person.
It's interesting because, I mean, Harrison was, and he was your teammate at the time, sort of the poster child for the initial Roger Goodell is the dean of discipline on the field era,
Definitely.
right? It was all about that. It was all about the hits to the head and Muhammad Massaquoi and different guys. And he himself, James Harrison, kept saying, well, this is the way I play. I'm not going to change the way I play. And so to me, I understand the distinction that you're making, but I think a lot of people looked at it that way and felt otherwise.
Well, they don't. I mean, real quick, a tweet from Lindsay. This attitude towards hitting hard and injuries, this is why NFL is losing viewership. I don't want to watch people get hurt. Lindsay, this hasn't changed. When the ratings were as high as they ever were, this was going on. You know what it is, right. Lindsay? You don't want to hear the words.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Actually, though,
you don't want to hear the words.
When the ratings were high, right, it was worse. It was worse.
Way
like
worse.
That was. We had Jacked Up. Do you guys remember Jacked Up?
Of course.
I legitimately used to go home for Monday Night Football and be like, man, I had a great hit this week. It was clean. It was a clean hit. I'm going to be on Jacked Up.
Yep.
And my homeboys would call me, RC, you were number 3 this week.
Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans proudly supports Mike and Mike. Rocket Mortgage brings the mortgage process into the 21st century. Forget about digging through stacks of paperwork. This completely online process lets you safely share your bank statements and pay stubs with a touch of a button. Using your phone or tablet, you can get approved for purchase or refinance in just a few minutes. Get a custom mortgage solution at your own pace, whenever and wherever you want. So if you're looking to refinance or buy a home, check out Rocket Mortgage today at quickenloans.com/Mikes.
Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Joe Banner is in our studio now, our NFL front office insider, and again can bring, I think, a nice different perspective to this conversation as one who was not on the field where these things were happening, but was in the rooms where these kinds of decisions have to be taken into account, how it's affecting our future, how it's affecting the future of kids playing football, how it's affecting the future of the business. Joe with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, half the cost. Long time no see. How are you, Joe?
Good to see you. I've definitely not ever knocked anybody out of a game.
Okay. So you and I have that in common. Yes. But you've heard a lot of this conversation.
Yep.
What is your perspective, and as one who has been in meetings where these kinds of conversations at the league level take place and at the front office level take place, and one who has signed a guy to a $100 million contract, and you don't want someone taking him out in a way that might cost him weeks or a season or whatever the case may be. What is your take on this discussion?
Well, you've got conflicting interests everywhere. Everybody's got a self-interest, and it's all different right now. I mean, the league would say, listen, this is simple. We want everybody to do everything they've always done, but not hit in the head or below the knees if possible, although they haven't really outlawed that. So they're saying, we're really not changing anything, and it would go on all the way to youth football, trying to teach people to tackle, differently. The reality is what Ryan's saying here, though. You get a mindset on the field with a play that's happening in a speck of a second, not even a full second. A player's got to make a decision, and they're clearly making decisions that are different than what they were. Now, again, the league would say that's not bad, so there's a couple of less big hits over the course of a game or a season or a weekend. But in the meantime, we're getting a safer game that will have a chance to be what it has been, at least for the long term, which right now is a little bit shaky.
Is it safer? Let me finish this topic on that question. Is it safer? Do you believe it is safer to play football now than it was 10 years ago?
A lot less headshots. I think one of the more dangerous things, and it was a lot with DBs in the way, but I'm not saying this in a bad way to DBs, but when they launch. When DBs launch and put their head down and they're like missiles, that is going to lead to nothing good, either for the guy they're hitting and a lot of times the guy that's putting his head down and missiling as well. I know. And I mean, but that was the way a lot of it was taught. So that's why I'm so adamant on youth football and teaching the proper way now, because that way, while effective, is highly, highly dangerous. So getting that out of the game, I think, is key. I think getting back to more because tackling stinks in the NFL. And so getting back to better tackling, I think, can help. And I think getting that out of the game, that launching, missiling head down, has been a big thing.
The only thing I would add to that, the concussions and obviously people getting knocked out is bad, but the research really is these subconcussive hits. The linemen are the banging heads with the opposite side of the ball 40, 50 times a practice.
Right.
Is what we think is actually a bigger danger. So the fact that we haven't really addressed that,
they have.
Wonder.
I mean, they have. They're down to one padded practice during the
I'm
war
talking
now.
Through all ages. I'm not talking just NFL.
Well, they have in youth football and in USA football. They have knocked it down to 90 minutes of hitting for the entire week. now. Yeah. Usually you do it as much as you want every day. Now they put a time limit on it for the week, and that's gone into high schools as well.
Well, if you look
so they are starting to get a little
the
bit
NFL. The NFL takes the lead in all of this, whether it be just down to the simple form and technique of tackling. So when the last CBA was done, that was a huge thing. When everybody was talking about money and what you'll give to get certain things, getting less practices, less padded practices was a very important part of that, and we were able to accomplish that. And I think once the NFL did that and showed that there was an onus on that, showed the research of those type of hits as you speak about, Joe, like those things moved down into the high school ranks, the college ranks, and now even the little league youth football. And so I think, it's definitely gotten better, but I also believe that we are too sensitive to the way things are said.
Could you expand on that thought?
On the fact that
why are we, in what way are we too sensitive to the way things are said?
Well, because we've now become a show me society, right? So we don't want to hear the words. If you're the NFL and you're saying player safety is key to me, we want to see that in every facet of life. We want to see it in the way you speak about football, the way you officiate football, the way you play football. And so when you hear a guy like Baldinger say, when Brian Baldinger says, we put a bounty out on a guy, well, you took a coach off a team for a year. You banned Greg Williams. You did these things. They want to see that implemented throughout football in every way. So now we've got sensitive to words, whereas in pumping up a guy to do certain things, like when you go to the gym, Greeny, and you're about to, lift that 85 pounds on bench press. Yeah. Right. And you're really going to do it.
I'm working up to that.
Right. Yeah. Right. The guys will be like, he'll be like, kill it, Greeny. You're this and you're that. And some of the talk is exaggerated. Right. Some of the talk is put on the boundaries or way on the outside of the parameters of what they're expecting you to do, because they're talking to you in a way that wants to get you pumped up or lead you into a point to where you're exceeding what you even expect you're going to do. And that's all Baldinger says. The bounty is not necessarily we want to make sure you get this amount of money for hurting a guy, but we want you to have the mindset that he is the most important person to focus on this game, and the way you approach him is the mindset we have as a team all day.
Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. In November, Progressive is giving thanks for our military service men and women by donating over 100 vehicles to veterans in need through its Keys to Progress program. You can learn more by going to progressive.com/keys to progress. All right, Joe Banner, I have two other things I got to get out of you today. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a really, really big question. If you could answer it definitively, you would save us all a lot of time and energy. Why are NFL ratings down?
I've actually been a little dismissive of this till yesterday. The fact that the World Series outrated a football game by as dramatically as it did was the first time I'm saying it's something more than. I think, by the way, there's a whole bunch of things that are true about people watching in different ways, and all. That's all. I think that's all real. But the degree to which we saw a baseball game beat a really good football game, two big markets, two iconic teams in a really good close game, it changed my mind. I'm starting to think, you know what, there is something more to this than just there's a series of things going on. I do think there's a series of things in terms of the feel about the game used to be a bit pure. There were things wrong with football, but we were focused on the positive. So that wasn't what we were talking about. It's not like the game's been pure all along. Now, all of a sudden, we're in a place where we're talking about the negative. I had a conversation with a quarterback once, a young guy. He played a game. He was, I think, the 15th for 25, whatever the numbers were. And, everybody was like, wow, that was unbelievable. Great game. I said, right now they're focused on the 15 completions. You got to realize someday they're going to be talking about the 10 incompletions. It's just we've shifted the way we're talking about the game. And I think it's taken a toll. And some of these are just incremental things. Some, I think, certainly the election has had some effect. Certainly the way people are watching sports. So there is a list of reasons. I think that's all true. I don't think it's as dramatic a problem once we come out of those things. But that really shook me up. That's really shocking. I was in the league for years. I watched ratings. I don't care. It's the World Series. I don't care what it is in your home market nationally. Football games kill baseball games. I know it's a unique series. Right. I know we got a lot. But they beat it by like 35%. That was shocking to me.
What's something correctable in football that could help ratings that you could think of?
I don't know that it's possible. You got to get the conversation back out of all the small negative nuisance stuff into the positives about the game. We had a great weekend of football. I mean, they got to try to build on that and get a conversation going, momentum about it. We got to be talking less about this injuries and concussion stuff, which doesn't mean we're not talking about it at all, but it's not the focus of our conversations.
It was to me the best weekend of football I think we've had in a while, and I was disappointed on NFL Live. We were talking about what Cam Newton said after the game. And I think we've gotten to a point where those things seem to be sometimes more important than what's happening on the field, whether it be because of Twitter or because of the immediate reaction that we can get from people and the things that they want to talk about. We seem to talk about them here instead of the actual football being played. And I think the way society is now, like you said, Joe, focusing on the 10 passes you didn't complete, the negative is also turning football into a game that people sometimes don't want to watch.
I'll tell you who hates the NFL, it feels like, more than anyone else. Football players. And I believe that is a huge part of the problem. Most of the negativity you're talking about, and I don't say this critically, I get their complaints. Right. But the people who are complaining about the NFL more than anyone else are the NFL players and the NFL Players Union. Now, I happen to think they're right 7 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times.
Do you mean like as far as the on-field stuff, or just the relationship?
Yes.
Or we say
the league
the PA
is crooked, the league is this,
you.
Roger Goodell is this and that and this. Yeah. You leave when the people who are actually in there are saying those things, it gives you a little bit of a negative feeling. That I'm just thinking about the negativity you're talking about. Who says more negative things about the NFL, Joe Banner, than football players do? Every week on the Players Tribune, Richard Sherman is talking about how awful the National Football League is and how awful Roger Goodell is and how awful all of these things are. When the people inside are the ones who are saying that, how are the people outside expected to react?
By the way, this is why Paul Tagliabue and Gene Upshaw felt the relationship they had, which some criticized because it wasn't adversarial enough, was actually great for the game. It's exactly what you're saying. This conversation, is not helpful. Somebody said to me the other day, I thought it was a great line. I don't know if we're killing the golden goose, but we're certainly smacking around pretty good. And I think that was a great line. I mean, from internally, we're not talking nearly as positively from within the league, whether that's players or, whatever, as we were. Now, again, I'm not saying that what they're saying is wrong. I mean, we are in a less compliant time societally. We're certainly in a less compliant time in sports, and that's going to create some of what you're talking about. You could argue whether it's good or bad, but I do think it matters.
But you don't hear it in the NBA. I just watched Adam Silver and Michelle Roberts sitting so close to each other on TNT set last week that their shoulders were basically touching, and they were laughing, and they were joking, and they were talking about the future, and they weren't capitulating to each other on every little point, but they were doing it as partners, and I do think that makes a difference.
When I talked about concrete things you can do, that's one of them. Yeah. The league and the union can work on things. I'm not saying that you're going to sit down on one day and solve it, but that's a relationship that needs to get better.
Well, we've all heard go ahead.
I think the biggest issue is when the current leadership of the union got its opportunity to be in leadership, we were in a fight. Right? And they've never gotten out of that fight, either side. Mm-hmm. When D. Smith was elected the director of the NFLPA, we were going into a lockout. So he prepared from the day he got the job to help the NFL players get through a lockout, to help the NFL players negotiate a deal when the owners were saying, you can't play ball right now until we get this deal done. It wasn't us deciding to strike or anything like that. And so I think that relationship has really never recovered from that situation. And I don't know necessarily if neither side has been willing to do it. I talked about Adam Silver for a week after I was on the show and got to hear him speak. I have never heard a commissioner, and he's the only one I've talked to until that day, other than Roger Goodell, speak that way about his players, speak that highly of his players, and about working with his players that way. And I think that's a huge difference in between the two sports.
The other thing is both sides are using this us against them to rally their sides to solidarity. I mean, the union last time felt like we could have got a better deal if we were more solid. So now they're rallying against the league. They're rallying against Roger Goodell. That's what you need. If you're going to be unified, I don't care if you're a team, a union, whatever you're going to be, you're against something. We're sticking together to be against something, and that's definitely not helping us.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Today is trade deadline day in the National Football League, which is not like baseball's trade deadline day or basketball's trade deadline day, where we see a flurry of activity and usually deals that, I mean, look at Aroldis Chapman and Andrew Miller,
right,
who are as important as anybody in the World Series, were both traded right around the trade deadline, and both from the Yankees. In football, this doesn't usually happen. But how do we explain the Patriots trading away Jamie Collins yesterday? Ryan, I'll start with you. And then, Joe, I'll get your big-picture philosophy. But just on the player himself, Ryan, your thoughts on them shipping away Collins.
Could you imagine getting the call from your agent that you have to go to Cleveland to play football? Listen, I know it's the city of champions right now.
Yeah, easy now, Ryan.
For you,
easy.
So, and I got a lot of heat yesterday about this.
Well, you should have.
But can you imagine being on the 7-1 New England Patriots, a organization that historically is in the run to win the Super Bowl, is run in a way that is top-notch as the league goes, and go to a team that is winless? Like, I couldn't imagine having to deal with that. If this is any other team, and you're talking about Jamie Collins, a guy that can rush the passer, a guy that can play the run, a guy who can cover tight ends and running backs, make open field tackles, you think to yourself, this is a guy you have to have on your team to win. Mm-hmm. We just watched the New England Patriots go through 4 games without maybe the best player in football and be 3-1. We've seen this team get rid of Seymour. We've seen this team get rid of Branch. We've seen this team get rid of Moss. And so
Chandler Jones.
And so
yeah.
Any other team, we're questioning this move, but are we really questioning the New England Patriots?
No, I'm not.
Because they will find ways to win. This won't even register to this team as this season goes on. And so for them, they felt like it was good to get a compensatory pick, which they would have gotten anyway had he left.
Just depending on how high it would be.
Depending on how it would be, right.
They use. Listen, going to a winless team, I get it. He has a Super Bowl ring already. So, we see this happen with other players when they get that Super Bowl ring. If they have their own choice to move on, he didn't have a choice. He got traded. He can, if he has any tears there, he can wipe them away with $100 bills. Because
he's going to get paid.
He wouldn't have got paid nearly anything close in New England. They just don't pay you that high there. He's going to get a boatload in Cleveland.
All right, so let's lay out the facts, Joe. It's pretty simple. And Ryan just pointed it out. They traded him away for a draft pick. They would have gotten a compensatory draft pick at the end of the year if he left as a free agent anyway. They traded away Jamie Collins for almost nothing. So that tells you there's more to this than that, right? Bill wanted him off the team for whatever reason.
No, exactly. Listen, this is my axiom. If you're trying to figure out what's happening in a front office, trust actions speak louder than words. So here's what we know. First, they tried it and traded for Mingo. Then they traded for Van Noy. Then they started playing Roberts a lot. In fact, they started him the other day.
Yes.
So we know that they don't think what we think. They don't think what we're saying about his value and his ability. Now, time will tell whether they're right or wrong. Their track record's pretty good. But when you've acquired or developed 3 different linebackers to replace the guy, the agent is saying they didn't call me to try to negotiate a deal. We're reporting that they had called around a number of teams, and this was the best deal they could get, which is equal to about what we think the compensatory pick would be. So the mystery isn't really the mystery other than why do we all think, or why has he been portrayed as such a good player? And at least in their scheme at this moment, the Patriots are not valuing him that way. This is different than what they've done, by the way, in the past. When they traded Chandler Jones, and you go back all the way to Seymour, we always thought they got really good value. Mm-hmm. Getting the equivalent of about what they would have gotten a compensatory pick is making a trade in the middle of the season and not getting good value for it. So their actions are telling us whatever we may be saying about Jamie Collins, how good he is, how athletic he is, they don't think that. Because they've been trying to replace him the whole offseason and then ultimately called a number of teams, by the way, who have the same film we think he looks so good on. And the most they could get was the equivalent of about a compensatory
pick. Well, I don't know
pick.
Football because Jamie Collins looks
like
a darn good football player
here?
to me.
Yeah, what are we missing?
I mean, it's one of those things. Obviously with Chandler Jones, we knew about some of the off-field things that happened with him. While in New England, I do not understand this pick because I don't think that the other players are as good of a playmaker as he is defensively, and also. I'm confused about what if some of those guys go down. If you could get the same value for him if he leaves you in the offseason, why not have this guy on your team to try to win with now. And so I agree with Joe. Like, what is the deal here? Is there something we are missing about this trade that we don't know?
Because, Jamie Collins, Levante David, and Thomas Davis are the only players with 200 tackles, 10 sacks, 5 interceptions since Collins' rookie year in 2013. I watch him, and I see an unbelievably versatile player. As Herm said, not a thumper, but, man, a guy that can play all different positions out there, and his versatility is incredible.
I would also add to this, look, let's say just Bill decided he wants other guys, he likes other guys better, if only for the purpose of depth, right? You've got a guy, you're going to have injuries as the season goes on. The last thing I'm going to do is question Bill Belichick making a football decision.
Yep.
He has already this morning forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But it has to be said, and Joe, I think you said it perfectly. The actions speak louder than words. They just gave away. It was the equivalent of cutting the player, because what they got back in return was almost exactly what they would have gotten as a compensatory pick.
Yeah, so let's speculate a little bit on what we think they're thinking. Remember, he's got 1 sack. So linebackers with 1 sack don't get huge contracts generally. And the best year he had 5.5 sacks. And I'm a little worried about using the stats because, as we know, I mean, if you're playing a 4-3 and you got 2 stud defensive tackles, the middle linebacker is going to get a ton of tackles, even if he's only okay. So this scheme was very conducive to the numbers he's put up, as opposed to saying he necessarily made those numbers happen. I'm not saying he wasn't good or contributing, but maybe he doesn't get 100% of the credit for all the stats. So he's got 1 stat. But remember, 3 guys. They got Roberts, they got Van Noy, and they got Mingo on the roster. So I think they're feeling like, by the way, some players can't adjust to being the starter and then being the backup. So they didn't start him this week.
Right.
If they think he may not have the mindset to be able to adjust to being a backup.
48 out of 70 plays.
Yeah, he did end up playing most of the plays. But listen, I looked at that as they were testing to see if the other guy was good enough that they were comfortable making this move. So they started him to see how he did. They'll integrate him more and more in the game plans as we go forward. But clearly, they don't view him as valuable or as good as we're describing him. And, there are some indications. I mean, you certainly see where he is freelancing. And if you know anything about what Bill has described publicly, he always is after smart, very disciplined players, preferably veterans if he can. It doesn't look like that's who Jamie is. Now, if there's also a work ethic issue, you look at Cleveland, that's more surprising to me. They're rebuilding. They don't expect to be good for 2 or 3 years. If they don't re-sign him, we're not sure they're going to replace the pick they gave up. They may end up with a 4th or 5th compensatory pick and gave up a 3rd to check a guy out for 8 games. I mean, that could end up being a really bad move. Or they've invested a lot of money in a defensive player that doesn't produce much in the way of sacks, which is usually what you're paying for on defense.
Super quickly, do we expect anything else of significance today?
I mean, I do think there are a couple of teams out there. I mean, I think the Eagles would love to get a wide receiver, but they're not short-term thinkers. So unless the deal is good or it's somebody they think has a fair long-term contract, I don't think they'll do anything. And I think there are a few other conversations, but I personally don't think we'll see anything.
There's a lot of talk around the Jets. Brandon Marshall, Sheldon Richardson.
There should be.
I mean, would you trade those guys?
No, listen, I think the way you got to run a team, if you're going to be good and sustain it, is okay. And this is my view of the Jets. We're not going to be good for 2 or 3 years. Are these guys still going to be here? The answer is no.
Sheldon Richardson could be if you wanted him to be.
Could be, although they're really overstocked there, which is not a problem, but they are overstocked there. So are they going to be on the team in 2 or 3 years when we're going to be good? The answer is no. So if we're building for 2 to 3 years from now, whatever value we get that helps us be good 2 to 3 years from now is worth it. Otherwise, what are we fighting to win 6 games instead of 5? I mean, that doesn't do anything for anybody.
College football lives here. After a 1-3 start, USC has won 4 straight and have their sights set on defending their Pac-12 South title.
Slash back at the 5, touchdown, Trojans.
Up next, Oregon comes to the Coliseum, averaging over 40 points per game.
Sudden change, big play for the Ducks, they take over.
Coverage begins Saturday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio. Presented by Dr. Pepper.
The Hall of Famer Cal Ripken Jr. is back with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Good morning, Cal.
Good morning. Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Good. Pleasure, as always. And there's so many different places to go with this series, but the obvious place to start is the pitching of the Cleveland Indians. As you watch what these guys have done, from the performance of Corey Kluber in 2 games to the way they have utilized their bullpen, how brilliantly they've pitched. They've allowed 25 runs in 25 runs in 13 games. What is your perspective on the way the Indians have pitched, and what have you ever seen that you would compare to it?
We had a good time covering them. So we had them in the Boston series and the Toronto series. and sitting there with Francona and talking about, really what a change is happening in baseball all over. Now, Francona will say, this is just how I play. We're in the World Series. I'm going to use my best guys. My guys are really team-oriented. That bullpen, they're not into the specialties. They all want to contribute. But I see a change. There for a while, people were into the specialties, and it had to be slotted in there. And the closer could only go here unless you're Mariano Rivera and you go 6 outs, but there were really only 3 outs. And everything was really slotted, and they were almost careful not to bring their starters back like game 1, 4, and 7. But we're seeing a sort of a throwback to where it used to be, where you're saying, okay, if I got an arm down there, this is the World Series, this is the playoffs, we're going for it. And Terry Francona has that attitude, and he's got his guys really tuned into that. Miller is the example. As dominant as he's been, we joked, and okay, is Miller going to be available in the second tonight? Is he going to be available in the third tonight? And Francona stops and hesitates when we were asking him that question, just to think maybe there's a possibility. But it's fun to watch, and it's fun to see how Francona is actually we thought that pitching staff, which we knew was really, really good during the season, was really damaged going into the playoffs. But he's had some challenges, but he's got those guys throwing really well. They're tough to beat.
And we can say that this is kind of the new way, as you said, but to be that way and for other teams to do it, don't you need the talent? I mean, there's not, Andrew Miller's around, everywhere that could come in the 4th or the 9th. So while the league may be going in that direction, do they have the talent to go in that direction?
Yeah, but I mean, even it wasn't until Bumgarner, they brought him back and brought him in relief. That used to be the norm. I remember, in Minnesota, won 2 World Series. They had Jack Morris that pitched 1, 4, and 7, and one year they had Frank Viola went 1, 4, and 7. And then starters were not being stretched at all to come back to go 1, 4, 7. You look back to the Diamondbacks when they had Randy Johnson and Schilling. They impacted, I think, 5 or maybe 6 of those games. And you do have to have the horses to even contemplate that. But I think what Terry's doing, and it has to be done during the season. It can't be, okay, you just get to the playoffs and now I'm going to do these crazy things. You almost have to condition for it. And I think he conditioned down the stretch to have Miller coming in at different times and even moving their closer around a little bit, or he had right-handed guys for lefties. He had it was just different in his matchups down the pen, but he started doing that a long time ago.
Cal Ripken with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Cal, you caught the final out of the 1983 World Series when you were 23 years old, and you were the American League MVP that year. So you have been where a lot of these young Cubs superstars are, great young players for their first time in this huge spot. Have you seen evidence that they look tight to you? And if so, how do you get around that in Game 6 of a World Series?
Well, I don't necessarily. I thought I saw a little tightness in the Boston guys. They came out and they had such a great offense, and the Red Sox seemed like they were a little uptight with their first experience. But a lot of these Cubs guys had great experience last year, and then took that experience into the regular season and became the best team here. And it doesn't always mean that the best team in the whole league wins the World Series. It's who's playing well at this time. I don't see them as tight necessarily. Pitching is going to be the best. I mean, the 2 best pitching teams are going to get here, and hitting is going to be very difficult. I don't see an urgency. Maybe with the exception of, and I used to feel this way against the Yankees. The game is shortened, so if you feel like you got to get out and get a lead somehow, the lead has become really, really important. Let's not fall behind because it's going to allow Francona to do that. If you start to feel like the game is shortened, you might put pressure on your first couple of bats when you really should just be letting the game come to you. That's the only sign. But I think these guys are experienced now. They're excited. They're gaining an understanding of what it's like to play in the playoffs. It's a little bit like Kansas City. Kansas City, when they had that success, and then the next year they came back, they were ready for this moment. It seems like Chicago is ready for it.
And I guess ready to win. The one thing they haven't been, Cal, is consistent with the bats. We've seen them get shut out a couple of times, in the Dodgers series and against Cleveland. Now they certainly, Dodger series they won it, but the question to me is consistency in the bats. They haven't shown it in these last two series, and now they're going to be asked. They already did it once to do it two more times, and how difficult that may be.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have guys that can hit the ball at the ballpark, they can be pitched to and they strike out a little bit more, and sometimes they're streaky. You look at Napoli on the other side, he's kind of, sitting right there. He's had some good swings, but you might look at him as breaking out. When they do break out, then it comes in bunches. So it's a particular type of hitting style that they do strike out a bit. They do walk a lot. So I wouldn't be, overly concerned. In the playoffs, small ball matters. And small ball meaning being able to execute a bunt at the appropriate time to move a guy over, or hit a ground ball, or get someone in from third base. Do some of those things. And most offenses really don't practice those things during the course of the regular season. And so the teams that can execute on those small things, and the Indians have done a really good job. Coco Crisp has really played a nice role. Has driven in some big runs, but he also bunted to get people over to contribute to runs. And runs are hard to come by.
Mike and Cal Ripken, just as my own little personal peeve aside, with runs being as hard as they are to come by, and you're 100% right, the notion that everyone is not busting it out of the box every single time they hit the ball is just unbelievable to me, but I guess that's where baseball is now. For those who don't remember Cal's career, you kind of changed the sport. You came in as a big shortstop who could hit, and from that point forward, basically starting with Cal and moving forward, we see a lot of that. What are we seeing in Francisco Lindor? This kid for Cleveland is a switch hitter. He plays with a flair. He hits it all over the place. What are we seeing right now in this young shortstop in Cleveland?
You're seeing a fantastic player. You could see his talent, and by watching him, but I really enjoyed. I got a chance to know him, covering them. And we went out and did a segment, Jimmy Rollins and I, and we just started talking shortstop. And they cut it up and made it into a nice piece. But some of the better stuff was just us talking about the angles and some of the shifts and how he positions himself and how he thinks about the position. I left him thinking, man, he's young and talented, but he really knows what he's doing. He, one of the examples that he used was the jump throw. I said, when do you determine when you jump throw from the hole and when you plant? Because I've seen you do both. And he says, well, if I have a lot of speed, and I'm stretched out, then I have to jump. And I said, so why do you bounce that throw? And he said, because my margin for error is much greater when I keep it low and bounce it over there. I can bounce it in many different areas. I don't have to be as fine. Just the way that he thinks about the position and not being fancy. I said, you're flashy. You have a style to you. And he said, I don't want to be flashy. I don't want to have that style. I want to catch it and make the right play. And I said, do you practice flipping the ball with your glove or doing things that or that you do, sometimes in the moment? And he goes, no, because I really just want to be good, sure-handed, cut down on my errors, and make the right play. So, he was impressive to talk to, but even more impressive to watch. He's a star.
Oh, he's a terrific player,
yes,
no question about it. So, as we look forward to the game tonight, we always hear people say the toughest game to get is the closeout, is the clincher. Why is that, Cal, as one who won championships? Why is the last game the toughest one to get, and what do you expect from the Indians tonight?
Well, these are two great teams. So, the game has to be played and has to go out there. So I think maybe the pressure might come back to the team that's ahead. You say, okay, let's take care of business, and you press a little bit harder. The best way to play in these high pressure games is to get into a state of relaxation. I think Derek Jeter probably was the best one that I saw, that he just enjoyed being in that moment. So if you're on the winning side, you got to say, okay, let's just keep playing, let's keep doing what we're doing, let's stay focused. One at bat, one pitch at a time. And let's not try to look ahead. And if you're the losing team, sometimes the pressure's off of you if you're down in the series, and then you just are able to play a little bit better because now your expectations have slowed a little bit. But you got Arrieta on the mound tonight. So I think the Indians know that they don't have it, all sewed up, and they're going to go out and play. And it wouldn't surprise me if Chicago comes out and wins this game and then goes to Game 7, which anything can happen.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The NFL's response to Cam Newton's complaints about the officiating should be blank.
Okay, this one I invoked a movie line here. So this is what the NFL should be saying to Cam Newton about the officiating. This is Happy Gilmore talking to Chubbs.
I'm stupid. You're smart. I was wrong. You were right. You're the best. I'm the worst. You're very good looking. I'm not attractive.
All right. As long as you're willing to admit that.
Well played. The league, by the way, according to our Ed Werder, has informed Newton that they did miss the call.
They did.
They missed one illegal hit on Cam Newton low. Calais Campbell should have been flagged on the low hit. Sometimes those hits look dirty. That one, I think we all agree, did not.
What was not dirty?
But that's not what they're determining here.
And this is what happens, and I had my fun with the movie just because it fit well, and I thought it would be fun to play. But this is what happens. This is what the call you get. Every week, in just about every game, coaches and or teams will turn in a tape to the league on hits or plays they feel were incorrectly officiated or called, whatever. And they'll get answers on them. A lot of times you'll get a call that says, yeah, you were right. You'll get a letter that said, yeah, we were right, you were wrong. I mean, this is what happens, and it happens every single week. But as Cam said, he thinks it's been happening a little much to him as opposed to other quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, so to me, the NFL's response to Cam Newton's gripe about the officiating should be, we promise to do better. Because the reality is, we're not even talking about the winner or loser of a game. We're talking about the safety rules that they have put in place that they enforce ad nauseum, it feels like, with all the other quarterbacks and not with him. And sometimes he's officiated differently because he is a runner. In the plays in which he is, all these designed runs and everything else, then you treat him like a runner. But on the play we're talking about here, and far too often, he's a quarterback, just like all the other quarterbacks. He's dropped back, he's looking downfield, he's delivering the ball, and you cannot hit him where he got hit the other day. So I understand his gripe, and I think he's 100% right. All right, fill in the blank. Mike and Mike, Golick, your NFL MVP at the midway point is?
I would give it to Matt Ryan. I mean, you have to do a lot of stats, and he leads in yards. He leads in touchdowns with 19. So I would go with him. Tom Brady obviously has missed 4 games. Brady can get it by the end of the year. But right now, I would go with Matt Ryan.
You know, I was thinking about that. Why Matt Ryan over Derek Carr? Derek Carr has a better record. They've won all these road games. Now, they did play each other, and Atlanta won that game, but they have more losses.
Right.
The numbers are almost identical,
Derek Carr has 2 less. He has less interceptions, 2 less touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, the numbers are pretty close, less yardage.
Derek Carr Atlanta's defense is bad. Oakland's defense is worse. They commit 8 million penalties. Actually, I have it. Let me find it here. I wasn't planning to use it.
Oakland has a better running game that helps the quarterback out. Oakland has a better offensive line, which can help the quarterback out. I get what you're saying. Listen, he's in the conversation. If you're asking me, you want to fill in Derek Carr, that's cool. Right now, I would say Matt Ryan. I would put Derek Carr in the conversation, though, absolutely.
Let me just find you this here. Not even so much for this debate, but just some interesting stats on Derek Carr. The Raiders are 22nd in the league this year in opponents' points per game. So these are defensive numbers. 22nd in opponents' scoring, 31st out of 32 in opponents' yards, 27th in total defensive efficiency, and they are worst in the league in penalties.
I bet.
So he's overcoming a terrible defense and a team that commits penalties like crazy, and they're 6-2.
They are, yeah.
I think I would give my midseason MVP vote to Derek Carr.
There you go. You're allowed to do that.
But overall, I think that it is almost a lock that Brady is going to be the MVP. I think it's almost not even worth discussing. Next, the NFL's regular season overtime format is blank.
Still better than college. Sorry. I know we had this debate all the time. The one thing I would change is even if the one team scored a touchdown, I would still give the other team a chance with the ball. I would still have both teams with a chance with the ball. In overtime, if you get a field goal in the first drive, the other team still gets a chance. If you score a touchdown like Dallas did, the other team never gets the ball. That's one thing I would change, and I have no problem with a tie. You go 5 quarters of actual football play and you tie. I'm absolutely fine with that.
I will use the word imperfect. The NFL's regular season overtime format is imperfect. And far too often we allow perfect to be the enemy of good. It's better, I totally agree with you, than college football's way. It is an imperfect, but the best way I can think of way to do it. So I have zero issue with it, and I share your previous opinion. Mike, I like this one. Filling in the blank with Mike and Mike, brought to you by Mahindra. The Raiders are the blank best team in the AFC.
I still think the Patriots are number 1.
That's for sure. Everyone else is just fighting for 2.
That is.
Are they
sure.
2?
No. I would put, to me, I would put Pittsburgh ahead of them, and I still think Kansas City is going to win the division, and I may even put the other 2, I think, could be a toss-up with Oakland, Denver, and Kansas City, but I think Kansas City is going to win that division still. That's who I picked early on. So, anywhere from 3, 4 to 5, depending on, I still have Pittsburgh number 2. Defense worries me a little bit. Obviously, the health of the offensive side of the ball as well. But I still do like them, and I know all 3 of those teams I mentioned have a better record than Pittsburgh. They'll only have 2 losses. But I would put them in that mix of 3, 4, and 5.
I think I'll agree with you. I mean, the Raiders are the blank best team in the AFC. They're not letting me answer it the way I want to, which is I think they have bigger upside in the long run than any other team in the AFC. But I would agree with you. Those other teams, I think, will finish ahead of them. All right, last one. If the Cubs lose tonight, their season will have been a blank.
Been still a great season. I mean, I'm just not. I know they were favored to win it and built to win it, and it's been a little while, and obviously all the pieces have come together, and I think they're going to be like this for a while, but you can't guarantee you'll get back there. I'm just not one of those that says you made it all the way to the World Series, and if you lose, all of a sudden your season is a complete failure. I don't like that at all. So to me, it's been a great season.
I will take it a step farther. I will fill it in by saying if they lose tonight, their season will have been a thrilling success. I get it. You'll be disappointed in Chicago, and you'll be disappointed if you're a player on that team. I don't care what has happened. You win 103 games, you make it to Game 6 of the World Series, especially with the youth on that team. It will be disappointing for a short period of time, but in the long run, it will have been a thrilling success. That's my opinion.
Oregon brings an offense averaging over 40 points per game into the Coliseum to face the red-hot USC Trojans. Coverage begins Saturday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio, presented by Dr. Pepper.